I do that.
Let's go on, and I'm going to bring in Dr. Totton. I'm going to mute his microphone, and now we're going to have a clash of the Titans here.
Oh, geez.
Between, and yeah, obviously we're so honored to have Dr. Carl Totton. You know, this guy is one incredible human being. He had I think his bio was put. Do you release it on Amazon? Is that correct, sir? Is it put out there? Okay. And I talked to Michael Matsuda, and he was all excited about you're going to be involved in the new book that's coming out. I think they're going to have a meeting very shortly to talk about Dragon Fest 2020, which if you haven't been to, guys, go down there. It's some of the most incredible human beings that are in the martial arts there. And, you know, I mean, what can I say? So I had asked Dr. Totton, and I talked to Dennis about this too. I mean, these guys are, you know, their knowledge is incredible. And especially Dennis from a Kempo perspective, most people don't know that Dr. Totton was also a 5th degree black belt under Ed Parker. And am I correct in that, sir? You can always shake your head, yes, no, whatever. Okay, yes. He's just, you know, plus he's went on and trained with many other people. So Dr. Totton was talking about, let's talk about, he convinced me, I ran out and got the book about James Mitose. And so let's talk a little bit about this. And Dr. Totton, you can talk about the book, and then we can go cross-reference that with Mr. Parker's book, Kempo Karate. There's 2 books here, folks. If you don't have these in your library, go and get them. This is an original copy that I got from Mr. Parker way back when. He actually inscribed this to me February the 3rd, 1980. And it's a really nice what he said, but that's, you know, that was one of his moments. So anyway, Dr. Totton, talk to us about the Kempo Book Club, and let's talk about Mitose, because if it wasn't for James Mitose getting together with Professor Chow, where would we be?
Well, that's certainly true. As we all know, James Mitose was a very interesting person, highly controversial to say the least. But in his position in the history of Kempo is definitely established because, you know, if it weren't for him teaching the guys that he taught back in Hawaii, especially people like William Chow, where would we be today? Would we even be here having the type of discussions about Kempo that we're having? Because, you know, from Ed Parker to Chow to Emperado and all of those guys, you know, art has evolved. You know, as many of you may know, Mitose wrote, this was his first book. He had 2 covers. The material in the book, just the first few pages are slightly different, but most of all the techniques and the basics and striking the makarara, all of that is pretty much the same. But he did put it out in 2 original covers, you know, these stiff black covers. And these books command a huge fortune these days if you can actually find them anywhere. You know, you can expect to pay $1,000 or more, you know, if you can even find them. One of I think Mitose, when he wrote this book, mine is dated 1953. And James Mitose had something like 5 or I think 6 original black belts. One of them is still alive, Paul Yamaguchi. And about 3 years ago at a martial art event, I actually got Paul Yamaguchi to sign both of these books for me as the last still living student, black belt student of James Mitose. He signed both of these for me. He gave me like a 1-hour private lesson. That guy, he was 89 years old at the time, about 93 now. The guy is still fast, tough, has great strategy, really sharp mind. It was an amazing honor to actually get a lesson from a man of his stature. And I was very impressed, you know. And
Dennis, have you looked at that book? Have you read the book?
Yeah, I've had that book for, oh God, I don't know. I probably had that 30 some years ago. I found one.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it's interesting. You know,
When you
that
say what, explain what you mean interesting, because it's basic roots of, as he writes it, Kempo Jujitsu, but he spells it two different ways.
right, right, spells it with an M at one time and an N with another. So the yeah, you know, just the pictures, you know, kind of antiquate the book, you know, from you know, back in that, you know, the 50s.
Right.
You know, I mean, it might have even been shot in the 40s. Some of those pictures, you know, and you know, a lot of the basic philosophies, the techniques were called tricks. You know, originally there was trick 1, trick 2, trick 3. Now I don't know if he's got them in those books or not, but
he just calls
there
them
were
lessons here.
they were called lessons, but Mr. Totton could probably confirm that the original techniques were called tricks.
Yeah, they call them, I think, wazas or tricks. Yeah.
Right.
And, you know, just looking at what's in the book, you know, there's a whole section of just kind of exercises for beginners. There's a large section on like the makawara, you know, punching and kicking the board. And he's got a section on kicking exercises, punching and striking defenses, kicking defenses, escape defenses, lock, break, and throw defenses, weapon defenses, and then the last thing in the book is the whole section he calls women and girls defenses.
Which was really rare, very rare
back
in those days. Women were not really, and children were not even allowed in the studios. It was too dangerous, too deadly.
Well, let's do some comparisons now, okay? So obviously both of you are familiar with the material. A lot of our viewers here may not be, only because either they weren't introduced to it or it wasn't something that of any interest. What can we take away from Mitose's book?
You know, I think that if you look at some of the techniques in there and then some of the techniques in here, you can see what might be called some of the kind of embryonic basics that Mr. Parker, of course, later took to a different level, you know, with all of his conceptualization and the way that he thought about how to take concepts and apply it to the street. Now, Mitose's book is actually called apparently in Kempo, the way Mitose thought about it, Kempo had many, many different branches. I mean, there was a branch, a lot of it had to do with philosophy and spiritual things. Some of it was Kempo theory applied to using like archery, horseback riding, all sorts of things. And then there was the part that he called the wartime arts. And that's what he put in this book, what you would use during a war if you had to use Kempo to fight. And the rest of Kempo, he never put in this book.
And that was, in terms of a timeline, right after World War II. And he came with, there was a lot of rejection on that because the Japanese were not really accepted. They were frowned upon because of, you know, the war that they attacked us at Pearl Harbor. So it took a while to open that up. And so Hawaii, being how it's mixed races down there with Japanese and such, it was more widely accepted down there with Chow, you know, than it was anyplace else. You know, so yeah, I think the war art was probably most sellable at that point in time.
Yes, yes. You know, Mitose was actually, he was Japanese American. He was actually born in Hawaii. And then at a certain age, he went back to Japan, you know, to learn his so-called kind of ancestral art of Kempo in one of the temples back there, allegedly. You know, I personally don't know to this day exactly where he learned or who he learned from. And if you look at some of the older books from like the 30s on karate or even Japanese Kempo, some of the organization of Mitose's book looks very similar. In fact, it looks like he copied some of the structure from some of those older books. So I personally am not, to this day, absolutely sure exactly what he learned or who he learned from, because he was never specific about that. And I know the Tracy family has done a lot of research on that. And if you read what Will Tracy especially has to say about that, you know, he has a lot of things that where he talks about. And I did spend time talking to Al Tracy. I never have spoken to Will or Jim, but I did talk to Al Tracy for many years, just because the man had like Mr. Parker, he had an amazing mind, and he was just a great man to talk to. And he'd been around forever, and he knew everything and everyone. So he was really fun to talk with.
Dr. Totton, you're talking, what is the first, gosh, this is a really wide open question. What is the first Kempo book that was ever published? Was this it?
There are some Kempo books that were published in Japan back in the 20s and 30s. It's not the same as we would probably call Kempo, but it was called, Kempo, when it's spelled with an M or an N, it kind of meant, fist law or fist art. And the Okinawan, there was Okinawan Kempo. There was even a Korean Kempo. The name Kempo has been around for a while, but it took James Mitose and then his students, especially Chow, Mr. Parker, Imperato, those guys, to really fashion it into what the type of Kempo that all of us are more familiar with today.
What is the actual oldest martial arts book that is out there? Are you aware of anything? You can answer that?
God only knows. I don't know.
I just figured you might. I'm sorry to throw that at you.
I was going to break in with
yes,
Robert Trias lived in Phoenix here, so I got to know Trias pretty well. And back then, he would always term it as karate Kempo. He would always say it was karate Kempo. And of course, he was an Okinawan stylist, originally Shorei.
Yes.
And then he changed it to Suri, S-U-R-I. Sureiru is what he did before his death, and he did that because that was the town apparently that the Shorei system started in, and so he wanted a nickname. He wanted to name the town was there. But Trias, had his own conception and ideas about Mitose, and of course, and obviously people on down the line, Sam Kuo and Bruce Jutnik. And I won't go into detail on those guys, but there was some interesting discussion on those guys, but there was different spellings and sayings. Usually the M denoted more Japanese ancestry and the N denoted more Chinese ancestry with Chow.
I have all of Trias's books too. It took me a long time to find all of them.
For those that don't know, sorry to interrupt you two gentlemen. Tell us who Mr. Trias is.
Dennis?
Trias was the founder of the United States Karate Association. He actually started the first karate school that I know of in America in 1945. After coming back from World War II in Okinawa, he became a highway patrolman, and he started a private studio. Mr. Parker started his studio in 1954 or 6, one or the other. I can't remember. I heard both dates on that. But Trias was an Okinawan stylist and became world prominent. He was oftentimes called the father of American karate, and of course Mr. Parker and he both went back and forth who the father was, and Mr. Parker eventually settled on father of American Kempo, and he was happy with that. And so both of them were historical biggies. I mean, Trias had Bill Wallace train with him, Joe Louis, Victor Moore, some of these names people probably today don't even recognize. Flem Evans. I mean, the USKA had a large tournament as well, the Grand Nationals, USKA Grand Nationals, and he also had different versions. His idea was of the United States Karate Association was to have a Japanese section, a Korean section, a Okinawan section, a Kempo section, and so on and so forth. So I won't go into some of the history. He tried to get me to go in and fall in line with the Kempo thing, and I said, no, I'm going to pass on that one. I'm with Mr. Parker, so that's not going to work for me, But
I remember I got a chance to meet Robert Trias one time. And that was, let me tell you, that was a big man. He
He,
was a really big man.
he was a
And
big walrus. He was a big walrus.
yeah. And, you know, all of a lot of the pioneers of American karate were there, including Mr. Parker and Mr. Tino, Tulio Lasega. They were all there. But everybody, I can tell you, was kind of showing a lot of respect to Robert Trias, just because he was the first one really to have a big United States Karate Association, which was the largest in the country for many, many years, yeah, actually.
Okay,
And
so let me go back. Let me interrupt you for a second. The first question I was asking, so with Mitose's book, what should we try to take from it other than just a history lesson?
I think, again, like I mentioned, a lot of the techniques you see in there, remember, he called it Kempo Jujitsu, right?
Right.
And as we know, Mr. Parker's first art was actually judo and jujitsu. What was he? Third degree black belt, I believe in that. And so and a lot of our techniques that involve, you know, manipulating joints and taking people down and breaking loose from hugs and grabs and chokes and locks, you can actually see some of the jujitsu influence in there, augmented, of course, with the Kempo's kicks and strikes.
Yes.
You know, like me, you know, I've studied Aikido. I took that for several years, but I would never try to just take someone and throw them using an Aikido joint lock or strike. I would do Kempo or something first. I'd soften them up, right? You know, elbow, bam, 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 then take them down. And it's a lot easier and a lot safer for me, because while I'm trying to apply that lock to someone, you know, what are they doing to me in the meantime? Unless you're going to do something like BJJ and really get down, you know, more towards the ground, or MMA that way. But back then, of course,
let's go back to that. You know, when Mitose is showing you some of the jujitsu movements with Kempo, Dennis, you and Dr. Totton have probably some response for this. Dennis, what is Mr. Parker's feelings on the ground?
Well, most of our Kempo, Mr. Parker and American Kempo, is all stand-up. We do have groundwork, you know, to some degree. We have a few techniques. But his theory was he didn't want to go to the ground unless he absolutely had to.
Right.
So there's less maneuverability, there's less exits. Besides that, you know, you never hit a man when he's down. You kick him, it's easier. And when you're on the ground, it's easy for anybody to kick you. And it's hard to, your vision is not as clear when you're on the ground. And so there's numerous reasons why the potential to stay up. If you notice, UFC and some of those similar things today, the UFC type fighting, originally it was all Gracie, the Python, taking them down and just choking them out and waiting until they just tore tired out. Most of them today, there is groundwork, but a lot of it is stand-up. A lot of it is stand-up in UFC today even. So it's pretty incredible.
So the answer then I'm looking for is then this is just the basic embryonic stages of Kempo that were shown to Mr. Parker. Then Parker took his judo and jiu-jitsu influence. So it now comes together, and we have Professor William Chow. He's a student of Mitose. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. Just making – I'm saying that.
Yes.
I know the answers, but I want to just ask.
Well, I think that's to a point, but I think his father had great influence on him, and his brother trained with him as well. In fact, Mr. Parker never started with Kwai Sun Chow to start with. He started with Frank Chow.
Yes, the brother.
To start with, and then Frank turned him over to Kwai Sun.
After he ran out of material to teach, yes.
So now,
I think.
So we're now moving away from Mitose's book, okay? And this is something you can pick up. I picked this up on Amazon. Dr. Totton said, go pick up a copy of this. And so I'm in the preliminary pages of reading it, looking at it, and trying to decipher what I can find from it. Now let's go to Mr. Parker's first book, Kempo Karate. This is a first edition, obviously. So let's talk about that, man.
This was one of the first books that I ever got, It's a great book, really, very well organized. Has a huge amount of material in there. I love all of the the charts in here, where he shows all the vital points. It's really highly interesting, and it has great drawings in here that that I think was really kind of ahead of its time. Showing like all the strikes, the hand and foot positions, and I think that if you look at the material that's in here, he has a section in here he calls the introductory section,
Yeah.
with the basics, and then he has what he calls the intermediate section with all the techniques in it. And again, if you look at some of the techniques, you can see like where maybe in Mitose's book, he'd block and he'd do like one hit. Mr. Parker might do that too, but he wouldn't stop with one hit, right? There'd be more continuity of motion, so he added, his own thoughts about what was effective in the street. And one of the things that Mr. Parker actually told me, and probably you too, Dennis, was when Mitose actually visited him at the Pasadena school and demonstrated some of this material. Mr. Parker and some of the other black belts that were there were a little disappointed because the techniques they weren't as developed as Mr. Parker had taken the techniques and developed them further, so that there was more safety, more continuity, and more effective street application.
There's more logic involved in them.
Yes.
I was going to say too, that was my third book. My first book was Brian Adams'
Oh yeah,
medical implications of karate blows.
Great
which
book.
a lot of those pictures in there looks very similar to Brian Adams' first book, and how he broke it down to how much time it would take for you to punch a person in the face, and so on and so forth. And Brian, I think, has now had that been in reprint too. I think Brian's in San Diego, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Last I heard from him.
Let me ask a quick question. In both of your opinions, both you, Mr. Knatzer, and Dr. Totton, do you believe that the book written by Mitose was written by Mitose, or did he have a ghostwriter to help him?
Like I said, some of the sections in there are almost identical to some earlier books that were written in Japan. So it looks like he kind of like absorbed or lifted or borrowed, some material.
Oh, let's say just plagiarized now. Come on.
Is that what that's called? Oh, okay.
He took some material for some other books, but, it certainly looks like, he put together, his own book, and his own thoughts are in there too, of his philosophy, where it was in there as well. So it's definitely a part of history. Yeah. And, being kind of a historian, I like to go back to the beginning and then work forward. And that's where I appreciate the book. By the way, here's another book that many of us know.
I have that, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a really talk about the cover, though, Dennis. Talk about the cover. I know Dr. Todd knows, but talk about the cover.
Well, if you put the cover up there, you'll see two Ed Parkers.
Yeah.
They're both the same one. He just double shot it. One was the offense, one was the defense. And, so that was the basics booklet that came out. And I think he intended on putting out a few more, but so many other things came out. The Secrets of Chinese Karate Project was there, sometimes called the SOC book, SOK, Secrets of Chinese Karate, SOC.
Yeah.
And, then, of course, the Blue Book.
I think you're right, Dennis, because this says actually volume 1, as if it was going to be a series. So.
Right, exactly. And then he just kind of scrapped it. I think the other books seem to be more valuable or more moneymakers, per se. And
So let's keep us all on point. So we've looked at Mitose's book as a reference to lead into Mr. Parker's book. I asked the question, who wrote Mitose's book? And that's up for debate. How about Mr. Parker's book? Was this a sole effort of Ed Parker? Did he have contributions? Were there people? I mean, this is obviously, when was this published?
1960.
63.
Were the Tracy's still involved? Was Jimmy Woo involved? Who was all there at the time this book was being developed?
Well, I'd say Chuck Sullivan, people like that were definitely around. Hibbler was certainly around. As far as I know, Mr. Parker wrote that book by himself. I've never heard anything to the contrary. Have you, Dennis?
That would be my take.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that because he would want to make sure the material was representing his beliefs and his ideas, concepts, principles. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of people watching here that could actually give us their thoughts. It's all an opinion, though.
It looks very Ed Parker organized. Whereas you look at the Secrets of Chinese Karate, it's a little different. The organization is a little bit different.
Talk about that book. We're going to talk about that today, Dr. Totton, but this was the evolution of the from the Kempo book.
Yes.
To the secrets. And we've already talked a little bit about the secrets in the last couple of special guests with Senior Grandmaster Chuck Sullivan, obviously there. But do you feel what is our takeaway for the young campus or the seasoned campus? What should we be looking forward in the in Ed Parker's Kempo Karate, the Law of the Fist and the Empty Hands?
I think of that book. It's got some interesting. He's got a lot of hand weapons in there, and he's got a lot of the hand weapons, and then the animal, that they were representing to mimic in there, like the tiger, like the leopard, the crane, the dragon, the snake. And so it shows you some of those things. It doesn't go into all of them. It doesn't go into the deer, the bear, and some other ones, the mantis, and other ones that were subsequent animals as well out of the Shaolin Temple. But I think his organization there, and to me, I think there definitely was a Jimmy Wing Wu influence on that, with that Chinese ancestry, as well as Mr. Parker's influence. And I'm not sure if Ark Wong didn't even have some influence on that book. If the truth were known, I would think there would be.
Carl, what's your thoughts?
Back in the early 60s, Mr. Parker, I think at one point wanted to really expand his knowledge. And he started hanging out in Chinatown, both Los Angeles and San Francisco, which of course led to him coming back from San Francisco with James Wing Wu. He ran into James Wing Wu in the school of a very famous Kung Fu master, Lao Bun, who was the Grand Master of Chorley Foot Kung Fu. Jimmy Wu's father and Lao Bun were both members of the Tong in San Francisco. And because Jimmy Wu's father was so close to Lao Bun allowed Jimmy Wu to just come into his school and not necessarily learn, but just practice, what he knew, kind of like over in the corner. And the day that Ed Parker came in there and saw Jimmy Wu over in the corner practicing, he was so impressed at his level of skill that he started talking to him and wound up inviting him to come back to Pasadena and help share some of his knowledge that then Mr. Parker could take and expand on what was in the knowledge of Kempo at that time.
Do you get to meet Mr. Wu?
Yeah, I met him many times. I would go down and watch him teach at his school. He was extremely skillful and highly knowledgeable. And the man had over 1,000 books, all in Chinese, sitting in his library right there at his school. So he could refer to a lot of the older knowledge from Hong Kong or China, because he had at least 1,000 books right there in his
Did
school.
he write? Did he ever author a book?
One.
Really?
Just a few years before he died, like about 2 years before he died, he wrote a book called Sifu. That's it, Sifu by James Wing Wu. You can get it on Amazon. Fascinating, really interesting book.
What was the best take you could from your experiences with Mr. Wu? What's your takeaway? I mean, his contributions and just your personal.
There was a time in the 60s where Mr. Parker started calling what he did Chinese Kempo. And I think that was kind of reflected a lot of the influence from people like James Wu, Ark Wong, Lao Bun, you know, many of these other people. And the one who introduced Ed Parker and Chow and Emperado to all of those people was Ming Lum. Many of us know who Ming Lum was, a great master from also under Lao Bun School in San Francisco, but he had also studied in Hawaii with some of the famous masters there and was a real ambassador of the martial arts around the world.
While we are on the subject, it's nice to welcome Senior Grand Master Dave Hebler. How you doing, David? Good to see you. Hey, now we got some in the mix. Oh, it's going to get interesting. Yes. Okay, Mr. Hebler, jump in on this. Jump in. You know, in a few weeks, by the way, Dave has a lot of projects that are coming up. He'll be one of our special guests on the Hall of Fame. We'll be doing this with him. So I asked him to come in, and maybe he might want to contribute just a little bit about the books that we're talking about. Actually, we were talking about, sir, two books we looked at. One was Mitose's book, okay? And the other book, we were talking about Mr. Parker's book, Kempo Karate, and The Law of the Fist and the Empty Hand. And then obviously there's a third book, but we're not going to talk, we weren't talking about that. By the way, Dave's got a couple things coming on, davehebler.com. You got to go there. He's got a whole new project. You have the Elvis experience, which he talks about working with Elvis. And then he also talks about, he has a manual that's going to be coming out that'll be for women. He has a great fondness to help women in the for martial arts and self-defense, and just a wonderful, kind heart when it comes to that. And then he also has some other projects. He'll be doing seminars and whatnot. So enough of that. So Dave, sir, tell us about, did you ever meet Mr. Mitose?
Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact,
okay.
I mentioned that Mr. Mitose was at Pasadena School with Ed Parker and a few of his black belts. I was one of those black belts. And
did you actually get to witness the
the
center knuckle to the toe shot? Did you get to witness the center knuckle to the toe shot?
Oh yeah. The one that really impressed me was a technique against a right step through punch, where he would drop down on his right knee and punch you in the knee without, I mean, his face is just standing up there bare as can be. And frankly, we were less than impressed with Mr. Mitose. And it got a little worse because he gave me a copy of his book, gave me his business card, and then asked me to join his organization right in front of Ed Parker. That was interesting. Wow. Bob Perry was there. Bob Perry just fell down laughing.
So you've gone through this. You've actually looked at this book briefly, even once, twice, maybe? His book?
Yeah, I owned a copy. I actually gave it to Dan Laxon a few years ago. I don't know what he did with it, but hey, Danny, give it back to me, will you?
Let me ask you this, sir. In your review of the book, is there anything that you find useful to help, or is it just more of just a history lesson for you?
Come closer to the microphone, Paul.
Oh, I said, is it a little more? Is this a history lesson for you, or is it? Do you find anything in the book to have material that you think is useful?
Nothing but history, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
As I recall, anyhow.
Well, let's now move away from that. Parker writes a book, which we all were just talking about it. You're obviously quite familiar with this book. Were you part of this book?
That book is light years ahead of Mr. Mitose's. I mean, no offense. I'm not here to throw darts at anybody. But you know, Ed Parker's books were pretty well researched, pretty well written, and pretty well diagrammed, and pretty well understood.
I see. Did you make any did you contribute to the writing of these books, or do you have any part in their development?
Yeah, he beat me up a bunch.
Did it hurt?
You know, I bet Ed Parker hit me 10,000 times.
Wow. What about the Chinese?
Still here to talk about.
Were you involved with that?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Are you still there?
What? Who, me?
Oh, yeah. I was asking, did you have any involvement with this book too, The Secrets of Chinese Karate?
I think Tom Gao had a lot to do with that book. You know, I was pretty much busy teaching. I didn't and going on demos with the old man. I really didn't get involved too much with the books, to my knowledge, anyhow.
Okay.
So
You mentioned Tom Gao. If you pull back the basics booklet, whoever had that, the guy that's in there doing the kicking, not Mr. Parker there, but if you go back to the back in there, you'll see a picture of a guy doing a side kick or a knife edge. That's Tom Gao.
yeah.
In fact, you can see it was partly written by Tom Gao. Right on his name's on the cover.
Right.
Yeah.
And I remember we were coming back from England, and we hit LAX, and all of a sudden this guy runs up to Mr. Parker. Hey, what's going on, Ed? And we're going, Ed? He called him Ed?
Yeah.
And so Mr. Parker sits and talks to him, and I think Skip and Lee were there. I'm not sure if they were getting their baggage or whatever, but I know I was there, and all of a sudden he says, hey, fine, what are you doing? And Gal goes, well, I'm a member of the John Birch Society, and I've been traveling around doing this, that, and the other. And so anyway, he finally leaves, and Mr. Parker goes, you know who that was? And I said, no, I have no idea. He goes, that's Tom Gao. And I go, oh, that's that guy in that basics book that you did. He goes, yeah. The guy was a skilled kicker.
Tom Gao used to wear lightweight gis, and I think I ripped 2 or 3 of his gi tops right off his body.
You brute.
We had brought up, it's so good that you could bring up the story on Mitose. Tell us about meeting Professor Chow.
I never met Mr. Chow.
No. Is that only a Chuck Sullivan story then? Okay.
I wish I did.
Well, I know that Dennis met him.
Yeah, Dennis, you did, right?
Yeah, he was. I was in Hawaii, and I was down there with my then wife, the mother of my kids, Cynthia, and I decided to call him up, and he was teaching at a Catholic church, real close to right behind Honolulu, over there, and he's much shorter than I thought he was, and very, very ominous looking, and he was quite interesting. His big focus was on telling me how he made Ed Parker Ed Parker. Everything that Ed Parker was because of him, and he's not getting any accolades and any exposure and stuff like that. And I'm going, well, sir, you're talked about quite a bit, so I tried to cover over that as much as I could, So, but he was a very powerful, very how do I say it? Overwhelming personality, I would say. So he wasn't shy about coming forward.
Deal, wasn't he?
I'm sorry.
He was a real deal, wasn't he?
Oh, his reputation from Mr. Parker to everybody else that I've ever heard of was he was a pit bull. He was just he was feared in the worst section of Honolulu.
Yeah, I had a lot of I had a number of conversations with Ralph Castro, and Castro spent a whole lot of time with Chow.
Yes,
and Castro was just scared of him. I mean,
Really? Wow.
He thought it was he thought he was death on 2 feet.
Well, yesterday we were talking with Chuck Sullivan about people that Mr. Parker gave an opportunity to be showcased. He talked about one of the first time he worked out with Bruce Lee. How you met Bruce Lee, correct?
Yeah, a few times.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, he showed up to school, and along with Jimmy Lee, who used to train with us quite a bit. Jimmy Lee, he was crazy. I'll tell you a story about him later, but if you want. But Bruce, we ended up sparring, you know, and I sparred him a couple of times, and it was nothing spectacular. It was just two guys sparring up a little bit. Nobody out for blood. Just having some fun, and he was quite impressive. And I thought, if this guy ever decided that he wanted to compete, he could probably do really, really well. But of course, Bruce never competed. Not that I know of anyhow. Dennis, do you know anything about that?
The only time I saw him was at the internationals, you know, in video there.
That 1-inch punch?
He was out there doing that little sparring thing. He had a little brief sparring thing going on there. That's about the only thing I ever saw him.
Dr. Todd, how about you?
Did
you get a chance to meet him? You didn't meet him, did you?
No, if he had lived 2 more weeks, I would have. Professor Dan Lee.
Yeah.
We used to work out all the time and going over Bruce's material. And he was going to bring Bruce by the school so I could meet him. But then 2 weeks later, Bruce died.
Yes.
Unfortunately.
Okay, I'm going to ask this question, and this is thrown out to the three of you. What is the impact of Ed Parker on the martial arts?
Well, I mean, ridiculously unbelievable. In my opinion, of course, I'm jaded, but I don't think there's one bigger. He ranks up there with Oyama and Yamaguchi and Funakoshi and Shigeru Kano. I mean, Ed Parker is Ed Parker. I mean, there's no taking anything away from him. He's arguably the best, in my opinion.
Dr. Totton?
I have to agree. Yeah, Mr. Parker's influence is just profound. And his ability to organize and systematize his material is unparalleled. I never met anyone with the mind that Ed Parker had. And the way that he was able to logically organize everything he did and not really overlook anything is just stupendous.
Mr. Hebler?
Yeah, I'd like to say to young Kempo guys who never had an opportunity to meet Ed Parker is that can you possibly imagine what it was like to be in a class taught by Ed Parker when he was 23 years old? Because I promise it would have been the experience of your lifetime. And if I wish I were there. For Kempo stylist is that my one wish for you would be that you would have had the opportunity, to be in his classes, because you would never forget it. It would be something that you would carry for the rest of your life.
I met him when he was in 77, 78 at a tournament with Frank. And honestly, he went out of his way to come over to say hello to me. And I said, what the hell? Why is he coming to talk to me? But then on the other hand, one of my favorite people, Ruben. How you doing, Ruben? It's good to see you. Spent a lot of time around Mr. Parker in Pasadena. So, we were just lucky being in Pasadena. That's all I can say. And I'm really grateful, by the way, to have you and everyone that's here today, especially you, Dennis Knatzer and Dr. Carl Totten and Grandmaster Dave Hebler coming in at the last minute to speak today. Because if we don't talk about our past, we won't know what our future will be like. This is, like I said, these are individuals that I call rare books that have worldly experience, that have so much to offer. I'm very happy that Dr. Totten, you're going to be a part of the Martial Arts Museum's new book that's coming out. That'll be an amazing. You're so beloved. And Michael Matsuda said to say hi to you. And if we can get the fundraising to go, then the book will come out quicker. Otherwise, whatever, as he said. So that, again, Dennis, It's good to
Not
see
only,
you.
I'd like to just bring in, not only is Dr. Cotton a wealth of knowledge, extreme wealth of knowledge in a multitude of systems, but beyond that, he's like Benny Urquidez, one of the most humble people I know.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you.
Well, we're humbled to have him. As you know, last year in 2019, he was inducted, and Dr. Chappelle was the one that introduced him, and he was the one that, and we were grateful that you could break away from your dinner and come down with everybody and to receive that induction. And you're truly a real gift to the martial arts, and we're grateful. And finally, Mr. Hebler, it is always good to see you. You're funny as all hell. There's a lot of more stories. If you ever get a chance to go one-on-one with Dave Hebler, I mean, verbally, if he's going to punch out, just run him. Outrun him. I swear to God, you can do that, I think. And he's in Texas, but, you know, he has so much to offer, and we are honored, and we're looking forward to seeing all those projects come out with you soon. So that's going to be great, and especially when we come on and we bring you on as a special guest. And I know you'll probably be asked a few questions about a guy that used to sing a lot of songs and you used to travel with.
Paul Casey?
You know,
I'm sorry.
I got one thing to add about Tom Gow. You know, after he'd left,
I'm sorry, I can't hear anything.
You hear me now?
No.
I can hear you.
Okay, go ahead.
I was talking about Tom Gow. After we had met him at the airport, I talked to him, you know, a while back, and what he had done afterwards is he actually was a member of the Birch, you know, of the John Birch Society, but what he ended up doing was going around and replacing a lot of the toilet seats with wooden ones, of which became the Birch John Society.
Glad you didn't give up your day job. All right, so hey, we've been going at it for some time. What's going to happen is that this video will be edited down into several parts. We'll post this on the Facebook page for the Kempo Karate Hall of Fame. We are very grateful that we've had the contribution. Say thank you, Dennis. Really means a lot that you participated on this. Dr. Totton, it's always going to be a reoccurring theme with you. You have so much to offer. So we'll be talking about other books that are going to come up in the next couple of weeks. And finally, Mr. Hebler, thank you so much. You look great, and I'm really glad to see everybody. Brian Duffy, Todd Durgan. Hello, Todd. How you doing, buddy? Yeah, one of my favorite guys, one of the nicest men right there. And Brian is all came. You know, Dennis was talking. Why don't we do this real quick? I'm just going to unmute this. Brian, say hello to everybody.
Hey, everybody. How you all doing?
Hi,
I really enjoyed the presentation. Good job.
And Todd, you're unmuted. Go ahead. Are you there, Todd? I can't hear anything. He's a man of very little words.
I'll tell you what, he's got a book on the universal pattern that is unparalleled, and it's Todd's got a book and a video as well. It's incredible.
One other people here. We also have Alfred. How you doing, buddy? Thank you for putting up for 2.5 hours, and your phone didn't die.
Yeah, good to see you guys. I mean, it was phenomenal. Good to see you, Uncle Dave. I miss our talks.
And then we got Dennis. I see Dennis Lawson's there. Hello, Dennis. How you doing, sir?
Well, it's nice of you to unmute me there, Paul. I'm having a great time. It's great to see some old friends that I haven't seen in far too long. And
hey, we got the same hairstyle going.
I just unmuted John. Hey, John, how are you, buddy? I can't hear you, but I know you're there. Doogie, how you doing?
I am doing good.
Are you good? Yeah, and then Patrick, I know I kept him busy the whole time, right? Ruben, say hello to everybody.
Hello, how you guys doing?
It's great, Derek. Your story about your dad is just Derek has helped me. I am incompetent when it comes to Zoom. And how many times did you help me on this? Lord have mercy. You know, I got a lot of people up here as well. I see
Hey,
Zach
Paul.
is there. Say hello, Zach. Are you there still?
everybody.
And then to see who else is. And then Robert's down there at the very bottom. Say hello, Robert. You're shaking. Yeah. There was anybody
Was that
else?
Ashmore?
Greg?
Hey.
So we have a lot of people here. And I'm just going to get rid of this.
Well, we got a friend from Chile, Jose Morales, down there in Chile's listening in.
We do. Let's see
Yep.
if I can pop this out.
Hey, Paul, I just
Yes,
wanted
sir.
to say thanks for doing this. This has been a lot of fun for a lot of guys that haven't, some of them haven't seen or heard any of this stuff. So this has really been awesome.
Thank you,
I've
Todd.
been in
You're
a
always
couple of
welcome
these.
here. He's one of the good guys. Really you know, the last conversation that I had for Mr. Parker was the inspiration between that conversation and my little girl, Jobina, who passed away a year ago. And Mr. Parker and I were at the internationals. I went to see him at the Vagabond, and Frank said, "Oh, I'll go back, and the old man, he's in the back." Well, that was between us. We would never call him that. It was always Mr. Parker. So I walked in, and they cleared the room. And, Mr. Parker cleared the room. He said, "Everybody go. I want to talk to Paul." So I sat in there, and he asked me how I'm doing. As anybody that never knew the man, he would always ask about you. How are you? What were you doing? And what can I do for you? And I told him I was there for the tournament. And when he said, "You're going to compete?" "Yes, sir." He says, "Oh, it's so good. I'm so happy for you." And he says, "Is there anything I can do for you?" And I said to him, I said, "Mr. Parker." And he said, No, it's Ed. And I said, "No, it's Mr. Parker." Yeah, I was grateful because he came to see me perform a few times. And I went to his seminars, and obviously I was on the receiving end, as Mr. Heber would say about getting hit. And Frank always said to me, "You got your cup on." I remember that. And I should have had that on yesterday, Dennis. But anyway, he said, "Is there anything I can do for you?" And I said, "No, you've done more for you would ever know." So the inspiration of the Kempo Karate Hall of Fame was inspired by Ed Parker, Frank Trejo, and the friends that I have met through Kempo, and the love that my daughter taught me about there is no perfect life, just perfect moments. And today is a great example of people getting together and capturing a perfect moment, sharing something we all have in common. So I'm very grateful for every one of you. Thank you very much. God bless you. I hope you have a beautiful Sunday. I look forward to seeing you next week. And take care, folks. God bless you.
Great to see Mr. White on here too.
Is he on right? Is he really?
Yes.
Mr. White, good to see you, sir.
Oh, there he is. Hello, Mr.
Thank
White.
Oh, there
How
he
you
is.
doing,
Thoroughly
sir?
enjoyed the
And
whole
there's
show.
Barbara.
Thank you.
And Barbara.
Hey,
Hello, Mr. White.
Excellent.
love it. Thank you so much for participating. I know that they have a Zoom podcast that they're doing to keep in touch with their students. And again, Mr. White is one of the most, I consider one of the inspirations for me. I remember when we were at the first year for Frank, and he graciously got up there and he was speaking about the Hall of Fame. And I'll let him tell about that. When that first time we had everybody there at the Almanzar in Alhambra.
It was a great evening, just surrounded by a lot of friends that carried the flame. So being in that evening was wonderful, and I'll tell you, I really enjoyed it. Dennis, you did a great job. Always enjoyed listening to your stories, and you just got such an intelligent input to Kempo, and it's certainly welcomed. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
The funny thing is that I told this to Mr. White. He's always been a good source of inspiring people. He's like the Kempo coach. He helps you to find yourself. And I'd ask him about questions about the members and whatnot. And because of him, I reached way past just Ed Parker American Kempo. And he said, "Well, that would be great if you could do these other systems." And last year we had eight sister systems collectively there in the same room, not wanting to kill each other. Instead, they wanted to eat. So it was wonderful. The first year, though, for those of you that don't know this, Frank Trejo I love dearly. he was very inspiring to me. And when it came to the first year, I told him what I wanted to do about the Hall of Fame, and to be people to be recognized by their peers. And so I said, Frank, who do you want there? And he chose, handpicked the first class of the Kempo Karate Hall of Fame members. And that includes Bob White, Rich Hale, Danny Ridardi, Paul Dye, Mike Pick, et cetera, Diane Tanaka. I mean, the who's who of what's what. Because Frank really respected, and he wanted these people to be recognized. And then subsequent years, the people that are chosen to be in the Hall of Fame are chosen by their peers. There's no board. I want to be clear about it. I just organize it. I don't do it to make money. I do it because it's the right thing to do, to recognize greatness in the Kempo world. And these people are chosen by their peers, by the other members. And some of them don't care for one another. I don't know why, but maybe they got punched in the face or something, but it doesn't matter. Together, we are a wonderful family, and I'm grateful for people like Bob White, Brian Duffy to be here, Dennis Knatzer, Carl Totton. The Hibben family is just one of the greatest. And like I said, there's 77 members of the Hall of Fame, and hopefully we'll be able to put all of them on a podcast like this so that you can spend a couple moments with them. So again, everybody, have a beautiful Sunday. Thank you for coming. We look forward to seeing you in the near future and some of the other special guests. All right? Salute.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks a lot, Dennis.
Thank you, sir. Everybody, thanks for watching, everybody.
Yep, sounding great, Dennis. Good to see you, bud.
Oh, ditto.
Mr. Casey.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to say thank you very much for having a very dear and personal friend of mine, Mr. Knatzer, on. He's my instructor. And the other guys I got to meet on here for the first time and here for the first time, Mr. Hibben, Mr. Hancock, Mr. Cotton, or Totten. These guys are a wealth of knowledge that are getting older, and we're losing them as time goes on. So we need to keep pushing these guys out there and getting their knowledge out into the Kempo ranks so that the younger people coming up get an opportunity to meet these guys that came straight from Mr. Parker. And it does my heart good. And I'm going to get a little choked up here, but I love Dennis so much. And
he's a good guy. He's a little sadistic because he likes to send dads Legos so the kid can put it, but the kid ain't going to put it together. All right. Hey, you know what? It's our Kempo. It was given to us by Ed Parker, and we need to take care of it. So share this with others and support our Kempo guys and gals, because it's, that's our future.
Absolutely.
And Dennis, I want you to write your book, sir.
Working on it.
Good.
All right. Good night, everyone. Thanks so much.
Good night.
Ciao.